Thank you very much. Mr. Bryce, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. Over the past 15 months, I've written a book, published a book, I've co-produced a feature-length documentary, and I've launched a podcast, all of which talk about the importance of electricity to humans and society. Darkness kills human potential, and electricity nourishes it. I'm pro-electricity, but I'm adamantly opposed to the idea that we should electrify everything, and that includes transportation. I'll focus on 3 issues here: affordability, resilience, and supply chains. But first, just a bit of context. EVs are cool, they're gaining in popularity, but they are not new. In fact, the history of electric vehicles is a century of failure, tailgating failure. In 1911, the New York Times wrote, "The electric car has long been recognized as the ideal solution." In 1990, the California Air Resources Board mandated that 10% of car sales be zero-emission vehicles by 2003, and yet today, 31 years later, only about 6% of the cars in California have an electric plug. So now let me talk about affordability and social equity. There's a problem here with affordability for the vehicles themselves. The average household income for EV buyers in America is about $140,000. That's roughly twice the US average. And yet these federal tax credits for EV purchases are forcing low and middle income taxpayers to subsidize effectively the Benz and Beamer crowd. Lower income Americans are also facing huge electric rate increases for grid upgrades to accommodate EVs, even though they are unlikely to ever own one or even drive one. This can be seen by looking at a report that was issued earlier this month by the California Energy Commission, which estimated the state, this is California alone, will need 1.3 million new public charging stations by 2030, with the likely cost of something on the order of $13 billion. The same report says California may need 5,000 megawatts of new generation capacity just to recharge EVs. Meanwhile, blackouts in California are almost certain this summer, and electricity prices, as I wrote in my piece in Real Clear Energy last Friday, are absolutely exploding. Last year alone, California's electric rates went up 7.5%, and the state estimates they'll rise by another 40% by 2030. This in a state with the highest poverty rate and largest Latino population in America. How is racial justice or social equity being served by these regressive policies? California demonstrates how not to manage an electric grid and how difficult and how expensive it is to deploy EVs at scale. Now let me talk about resilience. Electrifying everything is the opposite of anti-fragile. Electrifying transportation will put all of our energy eggs into one basket. It will make the grid an even bigger target for terrorists, cyber thieves, or bad actors. It will reduce resilience and reliability in case of a prolonged grid failure, in cases of natural disaster, equipment failure, or human error, all of which are inevitable. Attempting to electrify transportation also makes little sense given the ongoing fragilization of our grid due to increased use of weather-dependent renewables and just-in-time natural gas. Since 2016, the number of grid outages per year, what the DOE calls major disturbances and unusual occurrences, has nearly tripled. The blackout in California, or the blackout here in Texas, which I suffered through in February, as well as the blackouts in California, are indicative of the fragilization of our grid. Finally, let me talk about supply chains. Mass adoption of EVs will make the US more dependent on China. Electrifying half of the US auto fleet would require, in rough terms, 9 times the world's current cobalt production, 4 times global neodymium, 3 times global lithium, and 2 times global copper. Except for copper, China has a majority share in the processing of all of those materials, including a 90% share in rare earths, which includes, of course, neodymium. The conclusion here is that oil's dominance in transportation is largely due to its high energy density. That density and ongoing improvements in internal combustion engines and hybrids assures that oil will be fueling transport for decades to come. If Congress wants to reduce emissions, it should be focusing on increasing the fuel efficiency of the entire automotive fleet. It should be fostering micro-mobility, particularly in low-income neighborhoods. And finally, Congress should act immediately to preserve existing nuclear plants. The April 30th closure of the Indian Point nuclear plant in New York was a travesty. Congress must do whatever it can to prevent the closure of other nuclear plants, including Byron and Dresden in Illinois and Diablo Canyon in California. Powerful lobby groups want Congress to spend billions on electrification. But these schemes will increase regressive taxation on low-income Americans, reduce our resilience, and increase our reliance on China. That, unfortunately, is a dubious trifecta. Thank you.